plot to storm the Capitol and disrupt the certification of the 2020 election.
아이고야, 안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 콧물 나왔어. 운동하겠습니다. 오늘도 운동해야죠. 오늘은 1월 14일. 1월 14일? 1월 14일은 무슨 날이죠? 2월 14일은 발렌타인이고 1월 14일은 또 뭡니까? 모르겠네요. 오늘은 특이한 게 지금 백신 패스 3차까지 접종을 해야지만 백신 패스를 할 수 있다라는 지금 상황이 왔어요. 코로나가 시작된 지 2년이 지났죠. 근데 오늘 법원이 서울 지역만 백화점이랑 대형마트 이런 일부 지역을 백신 패스는 안 된다라고 판결을 내렸습니다. 와, 일단 팔굽혀펴기랑 스트레칭 위주로 하겠습니다. 역시 운동할 땐 CNN이죠.
Rush into D.C. if needed. According to court documents, Oathkeeper Thomas Caldwell, arrested in January, claimed that he took a reconnaissance trip to D.C. prior to the insurrection. And prosecutors say Rhodes was planning for violence well beyond January 6th, allegedly referring to the Capitol attack as nothing compared to what is coming. In the weeks after the attack on the Capitol, he allegedly spent more than $17,000 on weapons, equipment, and ammunition. Then, around Inauguration Day, Rhodes told his associates to organize local militias to oppose the Biden administration, and another member allegedly said, after this, if nothing happens, Civil War 2.0. Rhodes was arrested at his home in Texas Thursday. He is expected to make his initial court appearance in federal court in Plano on Friday. Now, if convicted, seditious conspiracy carries a maximum sentence of up to 20 years. Paula Reed, CNN, Washington.
More on this story now. What the House committee investigating January 6 says it's not getting the answers it wants from social media companies, so it's issued subpoenas. The parent companies of Facebook and Google, along with Twitter and Reddit, have refused to supply key documents requested by the committee. Chairman Benny Thompson says the panel wants to know how misinformation and extremism contributed to the attack and what the companies did to keep their platforms from radicalizing people. Now, after rejecting an effort to change Senate filibuster rules in order to pass voting legislation, Democrat Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema met with President Joe Biden Thursday evening at the White House to discuss voting rights. Mr. Biden says it's the single most important issue currently facing the nation. He said earlier that he remains hopeful, but is unsure whether the bill will pass. Now, on the Senate floor Thursday, Sinema said she supports strengthening voter protections, but insisted she's not backing down on changes to the filibuster. Listen.
I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country. The debate over the Senate 60-vote threshold shines a light on our broader challenges. When one party need only negotiate with itself, policy will inextricably be pushed from the middle towards the extremes.
Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has dealt a blow to the White House COVID vaccine policy. On Thursday, it struck down mandating vaccinations for large corporations, saying the measure was just too broad, but allowed the mandate for some healthcare workers. Now, the ruling drew both praise and criticism from various industries across the United States. The Secretary of Labor called it a major setback to the health and safety of workers right across the country.
Disappointed the court ruled against workers to keep them protected in America. Now, what we have to do is find other ways to make sure that we keep Americans safe.
Now, this is something we've been hearing for a while, right? The record number of COVID cases in the United States is putting, unfortunately, a real strain on hospitals. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, 19 states now have less than 15% of their intensive care bed space left. And because of those health concerns, Bank of America is telling its employees to work from home until they are notified to return. And it's not the only company. Goldman Sachs is doing the same with its employees until at least February. CNN's Nick Watt has more.
When you need something done, call in the military.
Military medical teams now heading to 6 states to help in hospitals. And
Next week we'll announce how we are making high-quality masks available to the American people for free.
the president also just pledged another 500 million free tests, but the administration still hasn't distributed the 500 million announced before Christmas.
We're on track to roll out a website next week where you can order free tests shipped to your home.
It is a matter of urgency for us.
Should we have done that sooner?
We are doing it.
But should we have done it sooner?
We are doing it.
Average new confirmed COVID-19 infections now nearing 800,000 a day. That number has more than doubled in just the past 2 weeks. Average daily death toll also rising, but that could be the lagging impact of the Delta surge, says the CDC director, who points to a preprint California study showing hospitalization and death rates are indeed much lower with the Omicron variant.
The data in this study remain consistent with what we are seeing from Omicron in other countries, including South Africa and the UK, and provide some understanding of what we can expect over the coming weeks as cases are predicted to peak in this country.
There are already signs of a plateau in parts of the Northeast.
Here in Boston, for example, for the first time in quite several weeks, we have actually no increase in the number of hospitalizations from COVID from yesterday to today.
But hospitals still stretched in Massachusetts and elsewhere. In all these states, remaining ICU capacity is less than 15%. And schools?
I'm deeply concerned about schools over the next 2 weeks. I'm deeply concerned because of staff outage on this.
Minneapolis public schools moved to online only for at least a couple of weeks. Nick Watt, CNN, Los Angeles.
Still ahead right here on CNN, diplomacy gives way to the drumbeat of war. We'll have the stark assessments from 3 days of failed talks to ease tensions between Russia and Ukraine, plus a further fall from grace for Britain's Prince Andrew, why Buckingham Palace is stripping him of his roles.
We share this place, we all belong.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. We also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Hala Garani tonight.
All new Inside Africa. Go inside the inventive minds, evolving places, and creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. Experience the unique South African sound taking social media and the world by storm.
I think the beauty about Amapiano is that it's so infectious, so inviting. It's simple.
Inside Africa on CNN in association with Zenith Bank.
We live in an unpredictable environment. My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. We also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
Amanpour, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
Join CNN as the world comes together for Expo 2020 Dubai. Innovation starts here as 190 countries and cultures chart a course for the future. And only CNN, the official broadcaster, gives you a front row seat to all of the action, with on-the-ground stories, interviews and shows, all live. Dubai Expo 2020, all this week, exclusively on CNN.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine remains high. Now, that bleak assessment comes after a week of disappointing talks across 3 European countries. Russia's deputy foreign minister said negotiators had hit a dead end, and he saw no reason to restart the same discussions. And the U.S. envoy went even further. Listen.
At the present time, we're facing a crisis in European security. The drumbeat of war is sounding loud, and the rhetoric has gotten rather shrill. We have seen a massive and unprecedented buildup of Russian forces, tens of thousands, now close to 100,000 combat-ready forces on the international border with Ukraine. We have seen all of the advanced weaponry, artillery systems, electronic warfare systems, ammunition, etc., that leaves a lot of questions.
Okay, CNN Sam Kiley is standing by for us live from Ukraine. Listen, there were very sobering assessments of what happened this week, and none of it good for Ukraine. I'm wondering what the reaction is there on the ground. After there were some hopes that perhaps more compromise, more talks would take place, now they're saying there's no point in even talking.
No, there wasn't a great deal of faith among the Ukrainians, Paula, that these talks would really lead anywhere. But they have done two things, they say. They've reinforced their sense of security in that NATO has not countenanced any of the demands being made by the Russians, firstly. And secondly, in large part, have actually revealed to NATO Vladimir Putin's hand in that he now has absolutely clear lines and may even accelerate the process of Ukraine being able to join NATO. That was the analysis of the Deputy Prime Minister when I spoke to her just a few hours ago. We understand we're not going to be playing that, Paula. But when we were speaking with the Deputy Prime Minister, who is the lead to NATO and to the European Union's accession process, she was very hard over on the need for the Europeans in general to aid Ukraine at this dangerous time for them militarily, not with troops, but with the weaponry to help them defend themselves. She says that the Ukrainian military has come a very long way since it was trying to fight off Russian-backed rebels in the Donbass in 2014, the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russian special forces, and the continued albeit low-level conflict that's going on in the eastern country. There are now 200,000 Ukrainians capable of being mobilized here in the regular army. There is fairly frantic efforts going on to train citizen army. There's also reports of preparations for insurgency and guerrilla war behind Russian lines if the Russians do try to invade. And the whole attitude here is that we in Ukraine, they say, have been fighting Russians and Russian-backed rebels for the last 8 years, and they're not that fussed really about an increase in tensions, because they couldn't really be any higher than they are now, Paula.
Yeah, it is an interesting and, as I say, sobering perspective. Sam Kiley, good to have you in Kiev. Appreciate it. We want to bring in our Matthew Chance now, who's standing by for us in Moscow. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, making comments that I'm sure will come as no surprise to you. It does follow a familiar script. And yet, Matthew, I kind of want to know, after this week of failed talks, I mean, what do you think Russia's posture will be in the next few days?
Well, it's the question, isn't it? We're all trying to sort of work out, and I think there's only one person that really knows what the Russian response is going to be after the week of negotiations, both in Geneva, in Brussels, and in Vienna, that have yielded no results from a Russian point of view in terms of their core demands being met. Their demands, of course, that NATO stop expanding eastwards towards Russia's borders, and that military forces inside countries that joined NATO after the fall of the Soviet Union be sort of rolled back. And it's Vladimir Putin, as I say, sitting in the Kremlin, that's going to assess the situation and decide what strategy to move forward. Now, there's been a lot of compromises that have been talked about by Western officials. Talks about reviving a nuclear missile treaty inside Europe. Talks about putting curbs on NATO exercises close to Russia's borders. Other things as well, bilaterally between the United States and Russia, that could potentially be yielded by this very forceful round of negotiations that the Russians have been conducting with NATO and with the United States. But it's whether they will, decide that those compromises are sufficient to continue the talks. And there's no indication yet which way Russia is prepared to go. They've got those tens of thousands of troops massed on the border of Ukraine. We've just been listening to Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. He's giving a press conference right now as we speak. And he said this, he said, we're waiting for basically written guarantees from the United States and NATO on their core proposals that I've just mentioned. But of course, that was the position of the Russians when they went into these negotiations, and they've had nothing but a sort of categorical rejection from the Western officials on those points. Paula.
Yeah, certainly more to come on that in the coming days. Matthew Chance for us live in Moscow. Appreciate it. Now, South Korea is reporting another suspected missile launched by its northern neighbor. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff says Pyongyang fired an unidentified projectile toward the country's east. Japanese officials called it a possible ballistic missile. It comes after the North claims it successfully test-fired a hypersonic missile on Tuesday, a launch that initially had the U.S. preparing for the worst. Sources say that early warning system suggested the missile could reach as far as the California coast. But it was soon understood that there was no direct threat to the U.S. mainland. So the British royal family is further distancing itself from Prince Andrew as he faces a civil sex abuse case in the United States. The allegations had already sidelined him from public duties, and now he's losing all of his military titles and charities. Anna Stewart joins us now from London. And Anna, as you aptly put it, the royal family essentially fired Prince Andrew here. He's lost his job, and the tabloids are really making a point of it this morning.
Yeah, that is how the news is running here. You got pretty much on every front page, driven out from the Daily Mail, thrown out, great pun from the Sun as usual, and the Daily Telegraph, Queen freezes out Andrew. And it just goes to show how people are viewing this. This is a decision that clearly came right from the top. Was it jumping the gun, given that Prince Andrew denies any of the sexual abuse allegations and obviously hasn't yet been found guilty? Or was this decision actually taken rather late, given how damaging this story has been now for years? The allegations, Prince Andrew's conduct through the investigation, not cooperating, the disastrous interview with the BBC's Newsnight a couple of years ago, where he talked about the fact he couldn't sweat the trip to Pizza Express, and so on and so on. And this is going to get more damaging still, because the case has not been thrown out, which was the primary plan for Prince Andrew's legal team. That was ruled out on Wednesday. This case will go further, and that means the discovery process goes underway. That will be damaging in terms of all the documents that will be revealed, phone logs, emails, diary entries, the deposition, of course, of Prince Andrew, and possibly other members of the royal family. So little surprise, I think, that Her Royal Majesty is wanting to distance herself slightly from all of this and distance the royal family for what comes next. He has essentially been fired from the firm while remaining, of course, a member of the royal family. And we can show you a list of some of the sort of military titles he's losing, because there are actually quite a few. It'll impact many regiments, both in the UK, but also in the Commonwealth. The most significant you see there is Colonel of the Grenadier Guards, which is a role he took over from the late Prince Philip in 2017. And this is one that will be very visible quite soon in June for Trooping of the Colour. It's one of the regiments in the Household Division. It's where the colonel would traditionally wear a uniform and be on a horse and march around. So it's quite interesting that this is being taken, this decision, months ahead of the big Jubilee celebrations. It feels permanent, Paula. We were told by a royal source that these roles will not be returned to the Duke of York, which suggests even if this case goes to trial, and even if Prince Andrew were to win, lots of ifs, this is permanent. He will not be making a return as a working member of the royal family.
Yeah, and I'm sure many Britons, despite how they might feel about Prince Andrew, are very regretful that the Queen is starting 2022 as well on this note. Anna Stewart, appreciate that. Now, coming up for us, President Joe Biden suffers a really bad day of setbacks and roadblocks as he struggles to push his agenda through Congress. The latest from Washington straight ahead, plus U.S. sports fans may have to look for extra connections to try and get to those Beijing Olympics. The reason all direct flights from the United States are likely to be canceled. We'll explain.
Globalization is definitely a key strategy for the overall Alibaba Group. We are deploying our system in 15 countries already so that we can better serve our clients. In China last year, we generated more than 60 billion parcels a year, which represent 60% of the total packages generated in the whole world. The most important thing for the logistics in China is how to digitize all the basic elements of logistics, how we digitize each parcel, how to digitize each delivery person. So we give them a handheld device so that they can be assigned the task dynamically. We digitize every warehouse. And the most important thing behind that is we want to build an agile system.
아이고야.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief. So let me just put it to you straight, Senator. Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
No nonsense.
Are you simply shooting the messenger because you don't like the message?
Facts first.
How stupid do you think we are? Allies in Washington are covering for him and they shouldn't get away with it.
Because getting to the truth matters.
The Washington Post went and confirmed the date of that hearing. So you're telling me unless I go back in the time capsule, you're not going to believe it.
Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
This is CNN.
Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. I'm Paula Newton. If you're just joining us, I want to bring you right up to date on our top story this hour. Australia has canceled the visa of Novak Djokovic for a second time, just days before the start of the Australian Open. Now, the immigration minister says he used his personal power to do so because in his words, it is in the public's best interest. Now, the unvaccinated Djokovic now faces deportation, and just moments ago, CNN confirmed that an Australian court is holding what it's